Thomas Sowell said it best. People will forgive you for being wrong, but they won't forgive you for being right, especially as the passing of time proves you more right as it proves them more wrong. This is what's wrong with politics. This is what is wrong with the world today. People just don't want to be wrong, and they dig in even more the more wrong they are.
Take a look.
Again, since, March and before, there were predictions that the tariffs, and granted, a lot of them have been pulled back, most of them have been pulled back, but all that tariff policy was going to lead perhaps to inflation, would lead to job losses, predictions of doom. That doom just hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened. And, John, I've been doing a lot of reporting on this topic. And what I'm hearing is that for the last few years, really since COVID, but even before, companies have realized that their supply chains can be interrupted for lots of reasons, for a virus, for a geopolitical event, for a war, for a climate event. And so they've been using technology to really streamline things. They've been getting their systems in place, and there's just a lot more efficiency in the system now. And
there is a lot more efficiency. And the thing is, I think a lot of the economic models and a lot of the models that people use to forecast are based on old ways of thinking and old theories. Plus, I always say an economist who's not a millionaire is like a fortune teller who doesn't know what the lottery numbers are tomorrow. They should be taken as someone that is just entertainment. So people have agendas, and people will look at the data, and quite often whatever they're trying to prove is what they will make the data show. So I have no idea if what Trump is doing is going to work out in the long run, but then that's what the point is. Nobody knows. So to speak with the certainty that economists and other people spoke with, it always scared me, because what they're saying is this will definitely cause a recession. This will definitely. And anyone that can speak that definitively about something to do with economics and human nature is probably not telling you the truth.
Comes in and basically starts the dumbest trade war in the history of this country. This is going to be about potentially millions of people losing their jobs. It's going to be about millions of people losing their savings, many of people losing their retirement security, and at the same time taking on even higher costs for everything they buy. So that's going to push us in potentially to foreclosures or people being pushed out of their apartments. I remember this from 2008 and how long it took us to dig our way out. And to this day, there are families, there are communities that still haven't recovered. Recessions can be all those fancy charts and graphs, but at the end of the day, people feel them one person at a time, and they can be devastating.
Several months later.
Listen to this, 147,000 jobs on non-farm. That is well above the estimates of 110,000. The unemployment rate went down to 4.1%. The expectation was it was going to tick up to 4.3%.
You expected some of this, but this is better than expected?
Yeah, Sarah, it is. Look, this jobs market is like the Energizer Bunny. Every single time we expect it to run out of steam, it just keeps going and going. So these new numbers show that the U.S. economy added 147,000 jobs in June. That was well ahead of the expectation of about 118,000, well ahead of some whispers that we heard on Wall Street of a sub 100,000 number. So this is indeed beating expectations. We were also expecting a slowdown. We did not get that. This is basically in line with May, which was revised higher. It's also good news. The unemployment rate was expected to go up. It didn't. It went down to 4.1%. That is a very healthy number. This is still relatively historically low. And again, it's below the 4.3% that we had expected. When we look at the trend in the jobs market, you can see that things have slowed down from last year, but not in an alarming fashion, right? We did expect to have weaker numbers here in the last few months. And so really things are holding up a lot better than feared. The unemployment rate, again, it's nowhere near where it was a few years ago. It does remain, look at this, the unemployment rate, it's still hovering.
In some ways, I think this is a triumph of business and how business has been optimizing. Now, that said, when we think about who's going to do well in this period, it's going to be big businesses. I am hearing that there's more pressure on small and mid-sized businesses that will be far less able to cope with whatever tariff inflationary impact we do see. That concerns me because small and mid-sized businesses are what fuels a lot of communities around the country. If you see them going under because they can't take even a little bit of tariff pressure, that could have a jobs impact. So again, optimistic right now, but it's, there are some issues on the horizon still.
All right.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think that's a good way of looking at it. You're saying, look, let's be optimistic. But one of the things that I want to see more of is the media actually trying to talk up the economy, especially when there are things that are happening or policies being put in place that could go either way. And by the media just being negative about it, it's actually not going to have a good effect. We should give these things an opportunity to be successful. If we then start to have economic indicators that are saying that this might be problematic for people, then yeah, we should speak about those things. But I always think about when I first heard about COVID. Like most people, we had no clue because we've never really lived through something like that. It's a once in a generation type of thing. But I do recall this vividly. When they started talking about toilet paper, I was like, why are they talking about toilet paper? Because the first thing that came to mind was not, I need to go down to the store, to Randall's, and go buy loads of toilet paper. But when they started talking about it, my mom called me. She's like, oh, I need to stock up on toilet paper. So the media should be more responsible in these situations, and especially when we're dealing with economic forecasts and things that could go either way. And the media being positive could actually give us a better outcome.
Right, but a good jobs report, one more good jobs report.
Yeah.
We've really seen a long run here. We're talking years long run here of this at this point.
It has been a resilient first half of the year for the U.S. jobs market, despite all the questions about tariffs and everything else. Let's just start with the numbers. Walk us through this jobs report.
I mean, I think resilient is the word. 147,000 jobs added. That's right in line with the average for the past year, about 146,000. That jobless rate fell a little bit. Average hourly earnings still a little light, but still, that's your paycheck. The paycheck growing 3.7% over the past year. So if you have a job, you're being compensated for it. So the headlines here are all pretty sturdy. Also, the month of May was revised higher, kind of defying expectations. But you dig in these numbers, private sector was not what was really.
It's not just defying expectations, it's really grading them that they have to say. And there's always the caveat of, but wait and see. But wait and see. But I think it is positive that they're at least reluctantly, through their teeth, they are giving a little bit of credit to the economy and the hardworking American people that are keeping this economy ticking along in a time of uncertainty.
Driving things. It was state government jobs driving this job growth. So seeing the weakest private sector job growth since last October.
Yeah, so Caleb, I think a lot of people have been waiting for things to sort of take a bad turn. When you look at DOGE, when you look at sort of the economic uncertainty surrounding the tariffs, what does this say about the state of our economy right now?
It's stronger than a lot of us thought it might be at this point in time. And as Christine said, a lot of the headline numbers look really strong here, almost surprisingly strong. We had April and May revised higher. You have the unemployment rate dropping from 4.2% to 4.1%. Less workers out there. That brings the denominator down. And when you look at the government jobs, we did lose 7,000 federal government jobs. Those are the DOGE cuts, 69,000 total so far. But other government jobs, local and state government, was probably the most aggressive hiring sector here. So there's a lot of strength and resilience in that part of the economy right now. Not a lot in private sector. We got the private payrolls earlier this week. That fell by 33,000 jobs, first drop in several years.
Yeah. So again, the cope is real. okay? Because basically CNN is admitting that their doomsday predictions were wrong, right? That the economy is not collapsing, that despite the tariffs, businesses are adapting, okay? Because over time, businesses have learned how to adapt, right? That's what businesses do. Markets are dynamic, and economics is not black and white, right? I'm here to tell you, it's really not. It really is a gray area, okay? And I think the mistake that a lot of these people made when it came to the tariff situation is looking at it from a black and white perspective instead of considering all possibilities in regards to what could happen, okay? And this is why they have egg on their face, right? This is why, once again, they're wrong, okay? And they're stunned and they're shocked by these jobs reports, by these inflation numbers, by all of the pretty good economic data that we're getting. And it doesn't mean that all the data is great, because as you guys heard there and what we briefly covered yesterday, it looks like there is some weakness in the private sector, right, in regards to job growth. Now, this report basically showed that a lot of the growth happened in state and local governments, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, I'd much rather have the state and local governments hiring, right, employing people locally, okay, than for the federal government, right? So,
and that's a really good point, because I think what might have happened is there's greater efficiency. You had all of those layoffs, and I feel bad for anyone that lost a job, even if, maybe they weren't working hard or whatever. But the impact on someone's household when someone loses a job is and can be quite devastating. So this is said with compassion towards those people. But maybe they lost job in a federal sense, and then they're now working for local government, or they're working for city government, which is good, because I think the federal payroll does need to be slashed considerably. And I think the efficiency that Doge will bring and that conversation will bring, hopefully will allow us to continually have a federal government that is there for those that need it, and it will meet the needs of people, but it won't be wasteful. There has to be a degree of waste. I don't think that running any government or any business completely efficiently is going to be a great thing, because you do need to employ people, but I think we need to be more efficient. We need to be more vigilant about how the money is being spent, because it's our taxpayer money. But within all of that, we need to make sure that the right people are getting the jobs, people are working well, we're using the right technology, and hopefully, just because it was Elon Musk, who a lot of people don't like, we haven't now said we're going to move away from this whole Doge thing completely. Hopefully, we will find the right people to continue to look and scrutinize how we're spending taxpayer money.
Federal government's losing jobs, and you have state governments, and they're picking up jobs and things like that. I think that's overall a good thing, right? That's not something to poo-poo, right? But again, the private sector, we are seeing some weakness, okay, when it comes to hiring there, and that is something to be concerned about. And I want to talk about that and what that could possibly mean for rate cuts heading into the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and react to this News Nation report on the jobs.
A new snapshot of the state of the economy. The latest jobs report coming in better than expected again, with nearly 150,000 jobs added. News Nation's Alicia Nieves is live for us on Wall Street with more. Alicia, what are you seeing in some of the data and the latest numbers?
Yeah, this was a good report. Quite frankly, a little bit unexpected. This is the 5th consecutive jobs report since Trump's tariffs went into place that have either come in better than expected or right in line with expectations.
And I don't think it's that they've come in amazingly well. I just think that people had the doom and gloom, and therefore it's better than what they expected. But if you were listening to what the administration is saying they hope to do, then this is in line with what they hope to do, and maybe even a little bit shy of what they hope to do. I think the other thing to consider in all of this, unlike a lot of politicians, I think what the Trump administration is doing, because it's stacked with so many business owners, they're 4 or 5 steps ahead of everything. And again, because economists are only thinking black and white, and they're only thinking about one thing, they're not taking into account the fact that, yes, there's more efficiency in the private sector. And AI is just changing the way everybody works. So smaller businesses don't necessarily need to hire as many people because they can outsource. They can also use AI agents and technology to be able to meet the needs of their customers in a way that doesn't always involve hiring new people. Plus, I think the other thing is with the immigration situation changing the landscape and the availability of employees and the more skilled people in the market having more choices, there's lots of things going on. And then when you look at the global economy, there's just so many different things going on. But I think a lot of these economists who are very anti the Trump administration are looking at this through a lens of negativity.
Expectation that, and that's notable really because since Liberation Day, as the administration has called it, there has been this fear on Wall Street and Main Street, you, me, and most people at home, that the tariffs would lead to some economic uncertainty and maybe some economic downside. But so far in the data, that has not been seen. The latest data point being the jobs report that just came out a little while ago, 147,000 jobs added when the expectation was that we would continue to see a slowdown of only 110,000 jobs added. But even more notable was the unemployment rate. That came down to 4.1% when the expectation was that it was going to tick up from 4.2 to 4.3%. As a result of this jobs report, again, coming in better than expected. If we take a look at the futures and where markets are heading, looking to open in just a few minutes, they're looking to open to the upside. They were earlier in the morning kind of hugging around the flat line, even teetering into negative territory. And so on the news of this report, we've seen this bounce in the markets. And that's really noticeable and notable, again, because investors were...
Anyone that follows the market and anyone that has a realistic and mature view of the market would say that the thing is, you have to think long term. So when they were trying to scare everybody about this huge crash around Liberation Day, and that was a boss move what Trump did. He just went on TV and was like, everybody should buy now. And I think the people that were listening actually made some money because the market has not only recovered, but it's at historic highs. So if people bought at that time when, some people were panicking, I don't think the savvy investors were panicking. I think they know that there's going to be movements in the market, but over the long haul, the market is going to go up. So I think people that have retirement funds in stocks, I think they've actually been better off. And I think the other thing that has happened is people are maybe now looking at the market more seriously. People that maybe haven't invested previously are saying, wow, maybe I should do something in the market, ideally an indexed fund. But either way, I think all of the scares and all of the conversations around this huge crash have not come to fruition. And in fact, we are at highs. Who knows what will happen over the next couple of months? And hopefully they will reduce the interest rate. But if they don't, anything can happen. But for now, the things that they predicted have not come true, and they have to talk about
pricing in the potential for further slowdown. Again, only 110,000 jobs. And they were pricing that in because we did get some economic data over the last week that showed the start of potentially some worry, right? We got PCE data that showed consumer spending. That trickled down a little bit, about 0.1%. That is huge in the fact that, 70% of our economy is based on consumer spending. And then core inflation with PCE, that rose 2.7% as opposed to 2.6%, which was the expectation. Then just yesterday, we got ADP, private payroll numbers. It showed a reduction in the private sector, about 33,000 jobs, when the expectation was 100,000 jobs. I warned earlier in the morning that ADP does not always correlate to the jobs report, and certainly we saw that now. The markets have priced that out, and they didn't budge yesterday on those numbers. And again, if we look at the markets right now before I wrap this, we're looking to open to the upside. We're going to go into the 4th of July weekend with, markets hitting another potential record. S&P 500 has been in record territory the better part of this week, and it looks like it's going to potentially close when markets close early today at 1 p.m. In that territory. I expect the president going to be taking a victory lap on Truth Social because for his end and for the administration, this is them telling, the markets in the world right now that there hasn't been this major economic impact that everyone has been worried about, 4 or 5 months into tariffs being in effect. But I will say on the other end, it's probably not going to lead to a rate cut, which is something the president has wanted. This all but surely removes the chance that we see a rate cut at the end of the month when the FOMC meets again. Marnie?
All right. Thank you for that update, Alicia. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's the paradox here, right? Which is that good data, that means there's less likely to be a rate cut, right? But if you get bad data, then that means that it's more likely to be a rate cut, right? Which is kind of like, again, that's the issue, right? So again, when you look at the ADP report, which is just one data point, right? When you talk about a loss of 33,000 private sector jobs, that suggests that there could be some weakness, okay, in the private sector. And this is why it's so important for the big, beautiful bill to be passed, because for all the criticisms of the bill, I don't think anybody's saying that the bill is not going to cause growth, right? I'm pretty sure that the bill with supply side stimulus, the deductions, the tax incentives, the tax benefits that a lot of these businesses are going to get as a result of this piece of legislation is definitely going to drive growth, right? So that bill being passed, I think, will help shore up the private sector for sure, okay? But if the private sector is showing some weakness, then I think that could be an argument for why, despite overall good numbers, why maybe small rate cuts are justified.
See, the thing is, I'm worried about this big, beautiful bill. I think Elon Musk was right about the bill not being ideal. I think the Republicans that have been against it are right because it doesn't go far enough. But I think politically, it was probably the right and only thing that can be done, because the problem that you have is a lot more cuts need to be made. And, it's unfortunate because that impacts people in their day-to-day life. But the reality is, if you view it as something that needs to be done, and if you don't do it now, it's going to have to be done at some point. And when it does get done, it's going to be even more brutal. And it's the same thing, not only in the US, but in the UK. There's a lot of government services that people depend on and rely upon that do need to be cut or do need to be made more efficient. And you're always going to have people that are going to be impacted and therefore are going to raise their voice about it. But like the Medicare and Medicaid cuts, things need to be done. I think some of the pressure will be taken off as this whole immigration thing gets resolved. I think that people who are able to work should work to the best of their ability. Wherever there's a gap, that's where the government should come in. But you should not have generations of people who have never worked. You should not have the option to not work when you are capable of working. However, I think it's so important for every government, especially in the US, as the richest country on the planet Earth, you shouldn't have people that are unable to work, that are in a situation where they can't eat or they don't have a home. I think there need to be those safety nets. But it's another Thomas Sowell quote: there are no answers, there are just compromises. So in an economy of so many people with so many needs and so many issues, there's no way you can fix everything. So there are always going to be people that are adversely impacted by whatever. So I'm not a huge fan of the big beautiful bill. Not that it matters, because I'm not anyone that can make a decision on it, but I'm not a big fan. But I see why it needs to be done the way it's being done. I think it was perfect to do it as one bill as opposed to doing two separate bills. But I totally agree with Elon Musk. Not necessarily about in the same areas, but I do agree when he says that there needed to be deeper cuts in here. But it wouldn't have happened if you put those deeper cuts in, because then on the flip side, the Democrats would be talking about all the cuts. So they do want to have it both ways. Hopefully the bill will pass. We will see. And hopefully it will pass before 4th of July, that we can have an amazing 4th of July celebration. And that will take some of the tension off the market. And I think that will open up the economy and really give people a lot more confidence.
If they're going to cut rates, why I disagree with the president is that they shouldn't cut them so big, right? They shouldn't do 1 to 2 percentage point cuts, right? I think that's too big, and that actually could have a reverse effect in regards to what they want at the long end of the yield curve, which is to bring down rates. It could actually increase rates if investors see that as too inflationary, right? So I think that smaller cuts would probably be more appropriate, right? Maybe, I don't know, 20 basis points, 25 basis points, I think 50 basis points at most, okay? But I would be an advocate of micro cuts at this point in order to just kind of tick it down a little bit, see what happens, and go from there. But, Jerome Powell has refused to budge at all on this. And the Trump administration is continuing to try to pressure Jerome Powell into dropping rates. But again, it's going to get harder and harder, right? The more good economic news that comes out, the more he can justify holding rates steady, right? Which, again, that's kind of the paradox here. So let's get into it.
Deal with the $9 trillion that's coming due this year.
We'll just turn it over. Oh, well, let me tell you that we're going to do it this way. We're going to turn it over short term because we have a stupid person at the Fed. If he would lower the rates, but I don't want to have to pay for 10 years debt at a higher rate. And then we're going to get somebody into the Fed who's going to be able to lower the rates. We should be at 1% or 2%.
Yeah, again, I disagree with that. I don't think we should be at 1% or 2%. I think that type of rate cut would probably backfire, but I do agree that rates should be lowered just, slightly, steadily over time. Okay, I think that might be appropriate. But we probably shouldn't do huge rate cuts at one time, okay? But I understand where the president is going. President Trump is the type of guy where he will take the maximalist position in order to get something going, right? So I'm not really taking his word at face value in regards to where he thinks rates should be. I think he's probably saying that, again, because that's the way that he negotiates. He takes the maximalist position. But that certainly is a maximalist position when you talk about rates.
And that's President Trump with me in my exclusive interview last week on the $9 trillion of debt that rolls over this year. I am talking this morning with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. And Secretary, I want to get your thoughts on that in terms of this $9 trillion in debt that is coming due this year. Not to mention the debt and deficits that many lawmakers have mentioned in the big, beautiful bill. What are the plans for the $9 trillion?
Maria, we've seen a great demand from both domestic and overseas investors for U.S. debt. We will make our decision on how to term the debt out over the next couple of months. But I can tell you right now, the short-term rates, 2-year rates are telling us that the overnight rate is too high, and we're gonna take that into account. But our debt management process.
These are the people that we need in the government. Like Scott Bessent, I believe he used to work with Soros, and this also just goes to show you that in the Trump administration, there's a lot of people that he at one point didn't agree with, didn't get along with. It is a diverse, as far as thought and background, it's a diverse administration. A lot of good has come out so far, some bad has come out. I think we will see. What I'm telling everybody is kind of just wait till the midterm. I think the midterm is going to be the definitive answer to if this administration has been good or bad, because if they can pick up seats in the House, if they can pick up seats in the Senate, then it's an indicator that the American people believe that this administration is doing well. And it would actually be a historic movement, because usually the executive branch loses seats in the midterm. So if he or this administration is doing well enough to pick up seats in the midterm, then it's a wrap. It's a wrap. Whoever who runs for president after that, because there's no guarantee it will be J.D. Vance. You've already heard Trump talk about Marco Rubio. I'd like Byron Donalds to be vice president at this point, and I'd love for him to be president at some point in the future. But the midterms will tell. I don't think the Republicans are going to do well in the midterms. I think that there's going to be a lot of distractions. I don't think the economy will be where they think it will be. And because there's just so much opposition to what's being done. But we will see. Like, I'm rooting for America. Like, at the end of the day, I don't care who is president, what administration. I'm rooting for America to win, because if America wins, we win. And, I appreciate everybody that's watching. Don't forget to make sure And like, subscribe, leave comments if I've said something wrong, if I'm wrong about something. If you have a view, make sure you share it, and be sure to subscribe to Black Conservative Perspective. That's where I get a lot of the content, and I comment on his comments, I react on his reactions. So I'd love to help him get to 1 million subscribers while I'm trying to get my subscribers up as well. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.